The hypocrisy of media, a mirror held up to both sides. In today's polarized world, media outlets, whether leaning left, right, or claiming the elusive mantle of neutrality, have become battlegrounds for narrative control. Each side accuses the other of distortion, manipulation, and outright deceit. Yet a closer look reveals a striking truth. Both are guilty of the same tactics they decry. From edited interviews to recycled headlines, the hypocrisy of media is a bipartisan affair, and the public is left to sift through the wreckage. Adding insult to injury, Western media often turns a blind eye to significant unrest, both domestic and global, such as nationwide protests in the US, or the worldwide demonstrations against Donald Trump and his agenda. Editing interviews a shared sin. One of the most egregious accusations lobbed across the political divide is the selective editing of interviews. The right-wing media, like Fox News, has been criticized for cutting clips to make figures like Joe Biden or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez appear incoherent or radical. A viral example might show Biden stumbling over words, conveniently omitting context that he was addressing a complex policy issue. Meanwhile, left-leaning outlets like MSNBC or CNN are accused of trimming Trump's speeches to highlight inflammatory remarks while downplaying moments of coherence or policy discussion. Both sides cry foul, they're misrepresenting the truth, yet both wield the editing scissors with equal gusto. The result? Viewers on either end are fed tailored narratives, blissfully unaware of the full picture. Copying headlines and phrasing, echo chambers in disguise. Another shared vice is the lazy parroting of headlines and phrasing. When a story breaks, outlets across the spectrum often recycle the same buzzwords or frames, whether it's crisis at the border from the right or systemic injustice from the left. A 2023 study by the Media Research Center found that major outlets, conservative and progressive alike, frequently mirrored each other's language within hours of a breaking story, suggesting less independent journalism and more herd mentality. For instance, after a Trump rally, you might see Trump incites chaos on CNN and Trump energizes patriots on Newsmax. But dig into the articles, and the reliance on similar wire reports or social media snippets becomes clear. Both sides accuse the other of plagiarism or groupthink, yet neither hesitates to ride the same wave of trending rhetoric when it suits their agenda. Pointing fingers while ignoring the mirror. The irony deepens when each side claims moral superiority. Right-wing commentators lambast mainstream media for pushing a liberal agenda, citing skewed polls or buried stories, like Hunter Biden's laptop saga, while conveniently ignoring how outlets like Breitbart or OAN cherry-pick data to prop up their own narratives. Left-wing pundits, meanwhile, decry conservative disinformation on issues like climate change or election fraud, yet gloss over their own outlets' tendency to overhype stories, like the Russia collusion narrative, when evidence is thin. Both accuse the other of being propaganda machines, yet neither pauses to reflect on their own distortions. It's a game of projection where the rules are universal, but accountability is optional. The blackout on protests, a Western media blind spot. Perhaps the most damning hypocrisy is what the media doesn't cover. In the US, nationwide protests, whether over economic inequality, police brutality, or government overreach, often receive scant attention from major Western outlets unless they fit a specific narrative. For example, the 2024 protests against corporate tax breaks in cities like Chicago and Seattle barely made a blip on national news, overshadowed by partisan squabbles or celebrity gossip. Both left and right-wing media are complicit here. The left might downplay unrest that doesn't align with its social justice focus, while the right ignores protests that don't fuel its law and order talking points. Globally, the silence is even more pronounced. Since Donald Trump's re-emergence on the political stage, protests against his agenda have erupted worldwide, from London to Sydney to Mexico City. In November 2024 alone, tens of thousands marched in Europe decrying his policies on trade, climate, and immigration. Yet Western media, especially in the US, has largely ignored these demonstrations. Why? For the right, it's inconvenient to their portrayal of Trump as a global strongman. For the left, it risks diluting their domestic focus on his influence. The result is a collective shrug, leaving the public uninformed about the scale of dissent. both at home and abroad. The takeaway: a plague on both houses. The hypocrisy of media isn't a left-wing or right-wing problem, it's a structural one. Editing interviews, copying headlines, and selectively ignoring stories are tools in every outlet's kit deployed to keep audiences hooked and loyal. Each side points fingers, claiming the other is the true villain. But the reality is, they're playing the same game with different jerseys. And when it comes to protests, whether nationwide in the US or worldwide against figures like Trump, the silence speaks louder than the coverage. As consumers of news, we're left with a choice: accept the half-truths fed to us, or demand a mirror be held up to the hypocrites on all sides. The date is March 10th, 2025, and the media's playbook hasn't changed, but maybe our approach to it can.